I'm Jane Lewis. I am a graduate of the HSA Oxford CCC programme, on which I learnt about positive deviance and have since been using it in my professional career extensively with behaviour change. The first project that I worked on was mentored by Jerry Sternin, the originator of PD, and it was about a persistent problem in Hertfordshire Adult Care Services. Hertfordshire Adult Care Services had a real issue because the presenting problem was that people were not filling in care records. This was costing them a lot of money, it was costing a lot of problems, and they had hired data quality managers to keep people filling the forms in, which they didn't, and there was 40% compliance at the time. They tried all many different kinds of things. They'd had lean done to them, all the processes had been improved, and the behaviour hadn't changed. So one of my contacts had heard about positive deviance and thought it might be worth a go. It took quite a lot of work with leaders and staff to get there, but we moved ahead and created a project where people in the organisation themselves, a diagonal slice from the administrators through to team leaders, defined their side of the problem with the permission of leaders. Their side of the problem was that they weren't filling the care records in because they didn't have time. And if they didn't have time, because 80% of the time was spent doing admin, but the admin didn't seem to be the care records. So, following the PD process, we said, okay, in that case you need some data about the time issue. How are you going to collect it? Because it's important that they did. So they defined a way of collecting data about the time. They got people to fill in their own design of time log, and they looked at the results. The results showed that actually they didn't spend 80% of their time doing admin, they spent 30% of their time doing admin. But they also discovered something that wasn't explicit, that many people were spending a further 30% of their time answering the phone from people whose relatives were should have been in the system, asking about where they were. This was not productive. The social workers didn't know all the cases because the care records weren't filled in, and there was all sorts of problems around that. So, however, they did also find from the data that there were people that didn't have the phone problem, and what they did was to ask them how they managed this. And it was a very simple solution, that the team that didn't have the problem wrote to everybody who's been assessed for referrals into the service to tell them how long it would take and what the steps were before they would be seen and before they would get their service. And as a result, they had less than 30% of the problems. So they adopted this procedure across the rest of the organisation, and the time taken, the 30%, dropped significantly. The other thing that they did was to give the call handling to an administrator who knew a lot about all of the issues because they were at the centre, whereas previously the social workers had handled the issue. This freed up the social workers significantly to be able to go and do more work during the course of the working day. And there were other behaviours discovered in the way that the records were actually kept by the people who did keep them. And one of the key learning points was for the people that despite the fact that they had been told by management that filling in care records was important, they still weren't doing it. But they learnt for themselves the enormous amount of wasted time that not filling the care records actually created. So their behaviour changed, and they saved up to 2 hours per person per week simply by doing this, and they recovered the cost of my facilitation and training with the group more than tenfold in the course of the first year. So it was seen to be a successful project.